We are live. Let's get ready to podcast.
Fire it up.
Welcome back to another live and amplified Indie Fusion podcast. I'm your host, Tom Quiet, and we're back at it again with another amazing podcast. Today, we have a very special guest joining us. We have Hannah Sears. How's it going?
Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's
Good.
between hay fever and actual fevers and all this stuff. It's been a wild week. So
yeah, I feel that, and crazy weather, and I feel that. I'm right there with you.
Well, you just got back from Florida, and I know Florida's been dealing with all kinds of craziness over the last several months, honestly. But
Yeah, you're so right. I know. We left Panama City Beach on Friday, and all that crazy like tornado weather was rolling up Saturday, and so we just missed it, thankfully, and got home to Nashville in time for us to be under a tornado warning.
Right.
So just good times in the South.
Yeah, we had a sandstorm kick through. So I live in Central Texas. Yeah, and so I left work on Friday, and I was watching the sandstorm come across West Texas, and I was
my goodness.
Well, two back-to-back weeks where we have sandstorms kick in, and I was watching it come across, and I was like, man, that looks rough. And then I went out like Saturday morning to go get in my car to go get my hair cut and do a couple other things.
Yeah.
And my car was just covered in sand. I was like, well, luckily that sandstorm kicked through in the middle of the night and not in the middle of the day. So.
See, this is also wild to me because I'm from the east coast of Canada, and so we just have like snow and nothing else in terms of weather. So like sandstorm, I have no context for what that means. I know what it means, but like that sounds so crazy to me that that's a normal part of your life.
We call it so I'm originally from Chicago, so I'm familiar with like the term whiteout conditions. I'm sure you are too.
Yes.
So what we had Friday night into Saturday morning, it's called brownout conditions.
Oh gosh.
So same basic concept, just different color.
Brown.
Yeah.
That's wild. But I've yet to come to Texas, so and I don't know if we get that in Tennessee. I'm new to Tennessee, but I doubt we don't have sandstorms. So I don't know, but that sounds wild. That sounds crazy.
It is. It's an experience. So
yeah. Well, I'm glad you're okay and that everything. I saw that there was like crazy things even happening with like windstorms knocking semi trucks over. Like there was weird weather this weekend, man. It was.
It was rough. It's like, I'm good. Now this week, it's just going to be warm, and we've got wildfire dangers, which that's fine. I'll deal with that. That's
my gosh.
So
isn't that crazy that's like, okay, you're like, that's fine. We can handle that.
Right.
It's bad.
Well, because that has such a human element to it. Like we have yes, the conditions are have to be a certain way, but as long as people aren't acting stupid, we can kind of maintain a lot of that. So
that's good perspective. Yeah, man, crazy.
I just realized though, because you said you were from the east coast of Canada.
Yeah.
You are my fourth Canadian in the last 7 days and third from the eastern bloc of Canada. So
I do think I saw something recently on Instagram, a clip of another Canadian, but that's so cool. You're surrounded. We're taking over.
Especially, and the fact that I think most of you are in Nashville. Yeah. It's like, man, I said it on one of the other podcasts. I was like, watch out because Canada's coming. So
it's true. There are so many Canadians in Nashville. So many.
Right.
Yeah. Right. There's a lot of us.
We love
it.
It is. It's really cool though. So how long have you been in Nashville at this point?
About a year and a half. I think I'm coming up on 2 years this summer. So yeah, just still fresh, still new.
Fair. And I mean, I feel like even though you've been there for 2 years, the city's changed so much within those 2 years. So
yes, exactly. And even since I started coming on trips, so much has changed. And the skyline even is just like constantly changing, and there's new things going up all the time. So yeah, changes all the time.
100%. Now, was getting to Nashville kind of always the goal for you, or was that
Well,
something that like once you got into music, it was like, oh, Nashville's where I need to be?
yeah. Oh, I love this question. It was always the goal for me because my mom wrote songs growing up. And so she loved like 90s female country artists. And so that's kind of what I grew up listening to. And so Nashville was always like something she talked about. And she even competed on this show. Oh my gosh, I don't even know if it's still around, but it was called Nashville Star.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that still around? Are you
No, I
familiar with
don't
it?
think it is. I'm
Okay, but
familiar
you've
with
heard
it
of it.
though. Yeah.
Yeah, she like auditioned and I forget how far she made it, but I think just knowing that she always looked at Nashville as like the place was really influential on me. And so growing up, I always felt like, wow, if I could just get to Nashville. But as a Canadian, it's hard. Like immigrating to a new country is a huge task. And
Yeah.
so I felt growing up that distance geographically was too big. And so it really wasn't until honestly during COVID when I started writing on Zoom and like doing this all the time that I felt like I was breaking into Nashville in a way that made it feel more possible. And so it was always in the back of my mind, but it wasn't until like early adulthood that it became more of a reality for me.
For sure, for sure. You know, because like you said, the immigration aspect of
Yeah.
things, it's not just like, hey, yeah, come on over, we'll have you. There's
Yeah.
a whole thing you got to do. So,
Yeah, I know. I feel that our countries are so similar that like I just and you can travel freely here and I came to the States a lot on trips and so it just
mhm.
didn't feel like immigration just feels like such a big word. And
Mhm.
so I felt like yeah, it just was a big process and I'm married and I have a daughter and so I got married early and I also had my daughter early and so that also played a part in it too because a lot of Canadians I'm sure you've heard come down on what's called a P2 musician's visa and that is like relatively easy to get but there's not a ton of money in music right away when you're just getting started. And so, as a mom and a wife that needs to like, be bringing in an income, I had to be more creative about how I was
Yeah,
able to get down here.
right. That's fair. You know, because it's like you could come to the U.S. as much as you want, especially between the U.S. and Canada. Well,
Yeah.
not to get too political, at
For
least
now.
for now, yes. Because
Yeah.
like I remember this is going to age me a little bit, but before 9/11, my dad worked in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
He was a pilot and he was based out of Detroit.
Yeah.
And every once in a while we'd go up there to visit him if he'd had like time or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Um and we'd go over to Canada and I didn't have a passport at that time. I was in 7th grade, so what was I
Yeah.
like 11, 12 years old, whatever I was.
Yeah.
And so we would just go across the border. We'd go hang
Yes.
out in not Toronto, but whatever the Windsor.
Windsor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and but then I tried to go across. It's like 10 years ago or something because
Mhm.
I was going to go shoot a documentary, and it was like this whole freaking process. And I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, this
Yeah.
is completely different. Like,
I
yeah.
know it's changed so much since then, like you said. And my husband grew up on a border town on the East Coast, so right on the border of Maine.
Hmm.
And they would cross, multiple times a week for like milk or
Hmm.
gas. And so yeah, I mean, it is a border, but like it just doesn't feel it never felt
Right.
that serious to me until I actually went through the process of immigrating.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So, what got you started in music then?
Hmm. Yeah. So, like I mentioned, my mom wrote songs growing up, and
Hmm.
so she was a single mom, and so it was me. Excuse me, me and my younger brother. And so she had a lot on her plate, but I just remember her walking around the house like singing her songs. She didn't play an instrument, so she wrote completely a cappella, but she would walk around and she would sing her songs. And I just remember thinking really early on, like that is so cool that you can do that. That's something you can just create. And so I started writing I mean, at 6, like we had terrible songs, but like writing nonetheless.
Hmm.
Really just trying to imitate and, follow in her footsteps because I thought she was so cool. And then I went through a lot in childhood and, life, like we always do, like we all do. And music just really was a friend to me during all of that and just something I could lean on. Excuse me. Music was something I could lean on throughout life. And so I wrote, I was starting at around 6. And then my mom got married and her husband was a musician. So he taught me like the 4 chords and the truth bit when I was 12 on guitar. And so I just kind of started writing more seriously from there. And it's just always been with me, always been something that I feel that was a gift to me.
Nice, nice. So once you got this gift, was there like a moment that you were like, "Hey, this is what I need to be doing," or was it like from the moment that you sat down with your mom, it was like,
Mm,
"This is me."
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I felt like it was such a personal and therapeutic gift for a long time. And so I'm not sure that I fully had confidence that I could do this as like a career, but I knew it was so personally and intrinsically a part of who I was. And so
Mhm.
I needed music and songwriting specifically to get through life. And so I knew that that was important to me. But then that piece of thinking, like, that's such a crazy thing to dream to have as a career. And like, again, especially when I got married and became a mom, I was like, I have to do like mom things or like wife things. Um, and so it really was something that I always wanted very deeply, but not always something I believed I could have.
Fair, fair, fair. Was there a point like once you got married and had your daughter,
Yeah.
was there a point where you're like, you know what, I'm gonna put my music away and we'll revisit it
Mm.
later in life?
Oh, well, that's such a good question. So my husband and I moved after college we got married when I was in my 3rd year of college. I
Hmm.
was 19. It's crazy. A baby, a true baby. So we were married and moved like 20 hours from our hometown. So we were like central Canada, actually not too far from Windsor, Detroit. We were on the Minnesota border, but
Hmm.
not too far from where you would have been crossing over. So we were in a transition season and like I had just finished college. I still really wanted to do music, but I didn't know what that looked like. And I was just working like retail jobs or whatever, just hustling. And I remember I was in transition between jobs and my husband was like, why don't you just like work on music? I didn't really need to work. We were in a season where, his job was providing well for us. And so I took a break from working and I just
Yeah.
like focused on music. I got into the studio for the first time and I was like writing and planning trips to Nashville. And then I got pregnant and it was not planned. And I was
Hmm.
like, well, okay, there goes music. That was my first thought, which I feel, and I'm in a much different place now with what I think about that. But just in that moment, I remember thinking, there's no way I could prioritize this as a mom. And then, yeah, so I kept writing, but I just felt discouraged. I didn't feel like it was something I could pursue after I had my daughter. But then I had her and I realized like, I think that in life, like, and especially in parenting, it's just what you make it. And so I do think that there are people in life who choose to like, put dreams on hold when they have kids. And I respect that. And like, it's a personal choice for everyone. But for me, I just realized I could do both. And that actually was really fulfilling. And also a good example for my daughter that you can do multiple things and you can be multiple things. And you don't have to put your dreams on pause when you have
Hmm.
a family.
100%. Like that's a very real thing because like I know plenty of people that kind of put their dreams and aspirations on hold once they have kids, and then they come and revisit it in their 30s and 40s once their kids either a go back to school or start
Right.
going to school or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's like I get that logic like
Yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
but it's also a really cool message to, yes, continue pursuing your dreams, but also drawing that line like, okay, if my kid gets sick or something
Mm-hmm.
comes up, this can wait, whereas
Yeah.
my kid cannot.
Yeah.
I've seen it the other way where they'll
Yeah.
dive so deep into their passion and then they'll
Mm-hmm.
just kind of neglect the kid and the kid starts to resent their passion,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you're so right. I think it's just about balance. And I think that eventually we all have to learn how to do that in adulthood and in careers. And so I think it's a blessing that I started out in marriage and parenthood early, because I learned how to balance those things quicker or earlier maybe than I would have. But around the time that my daughter was born, we actually opened a business back home in Canada. We opened a pottery painting studio.
Nice.
And I just remember thinking, like, I'm doing this, and if I can do this, have a business that I run and manage, and like, also have a family that I'm, like you mentioned, not like
Yeah.
neglecting, but prioritizing, and
Yeah.
then surely if I can do that, I can chase a dream.
Right.
So I just felt empowered to do it, and I did it.
Nice. 100%. So you've been in Nashville now for just, you said about 2 years coming up
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
How's Nashville kind of changed you as a musician? How's it like? Obviously, you're in the tool shed. You're getting
Yeah.
you're competing against some of the best in the world that do this.
Yeah.
How's Nashville kind of changed you as a musician?
That's a great question. I think that it is impossible not to become better when you're here.
Yeah.
Especially if you're immersed in it. Like, there's just, like you said, so much talent. The best of the best are here writing songs and doing the thing. And so for me, I struggle with insecurities, of course, and imposter syndrome all of the time. I just played a show at a venue here in Nashville called The Listening Room, and it's like top of my bucket list.
Hmm.
Anytime I get to play there, it's really special. I see my favorite songwriters play there. And so when I get to be on that stage, I'm like super stoked about it. But then I'm like, I don't belong here. What do you mean that I just saw like my favorite, songwriter play here, and now I'm playing? Like, that's crazy. I don't belong up here. And so I wrestle with that. But I think it's been helpful for me to choose to switch my perspective on that and learn, instead of feeling like intimidated or feeling like I'm not good enough. I'm just choosing to learn from people that are better than me, because there are a lot of people that are just, as musicians and writers and artists, just better and more talented. And so I think when you're like rubbing shoulders with people like that, and in writing rooms with people like that, and playing rounds with those people, you just become better, because the bar is so high here.
Hmm.
And I think to be here, you have to try and to meet that in some way. And so it's helped a lot. I mean, I just feel more confident even playing shows. Before I came to Nashville, I had never accompanied myself on guitar at a show. And so that was a personal goal for me when I got here. I just said, I need to be comfortable enough and confident enough to play a show. I don't want to have someone, backing me up on guitar. I want to be able to do this. And so I played a few rounds where I just botched every song and just like figured it out by embarrassing myself. But now I'm comfortable and confident to do that. And so I just think that's what Nashville does. It either makes you better or it sends you home.
100%. And it also, it'll either, Nashville will either turn you against your passion, because
Yeah.
it's like you
Yeah.
kind of get in this stage of resentment where it's like, dang it, I don't feel like I'm getting any better, because you see all these other musicians kind of getting like opportunities or whatever, and like you'd kind of mentioned, the imposter syndrome really starts to kick in, and you start to kind of resent the industry. And it's like, but you got to understand, once you get to where you want to go, it's going to feel so much better. Like,
Yes.
you can't compare yourself to anyone else on the street, because you've been doing this for let's say you've been doing this for 5 years, but they may have been doing it for 20 years. So you just see them get their shot at the listening room or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like, you just don't know. So
Yeah. No, you're so right. And I think kind of what you're speaking to is like this tension between wanting it bad enough, and you really have to obviously want it bad enough. And I've had so many like mentors and people here in the industry tell me, if you just stick around long enough, like so many people will leave, that like just longevity will probably land you with success, because people they do leave. It gets discouraging. And if you stick around long enough, then likely you'll find your spot. But so I think there's like this tension of like, you need to want it bad enough, but you also need to be able to have things outside of music. Like, it can't be only music, because like you said, you end up resenting Nashville or like your talent or, your gift. And so I think for me, having, a life outside of music, or a home and a family to come home to at the end of the day, It helps me realize like I want this more than anything, but I also have things that, are part of my life that make me happy outside of music, and
Right.
balancing that well, I think is important and hard to do when you're young moving to town. So I'm glad I moved like in my mid 20s so that I
Right.
had
Right.
some of
Right.
that.
What are some of those things outside of the industry that you've been getting into?
Yeah. So I work part-time at a church here in Nashville, and so I work with the kids, and that's really special, and it's just really cool to have like a job outside of music where like and my the team I work with and the people I work with are incredible, and they, come out to my shows and stuff, and so it's like it's all tied together.
Hmm.
My worlds are all like intermingled, but it's cool to be able to like go to the office and you have something else outside of music to think about and work on, and then I have my family, and so I'm involved at like my daughter's school. I'm on her PTO at her school, and so I was just on a PTO meeting tonight before this call, and so it's cool to be able to be like, okay, I am a songwriter and an artist, and I'm hustling and trying to make that work, and then I also need to go home and like make dinner and show up at the PTO meeting,
Right.
So I'm living like that balance of having somewhat normal life and then also chasing like a crazy abnormal dream.
That's fair. And I think that's something that I've kind of struggled with is finding something outside of this, just,
Yeah.
and it's a little bit harder for me because it's like I work a 40-hour a week job
Yeah.
and I'm there from 8 a.m. I'm essentially there from 8 a.m. till about 6 p.m. And then I come back and I do this. And it's like by the time I'm done with this, whether it's doing the interview, then cutting
Mhm.
everything for social, and then
Yeah.
post, doing all that stuff, it's like 10, 11 o'clock. And it's like, well, even if I wanted to go to like get something to eat, there ain't going to be
Yeah.
nothing but like McDonald's open. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to hang out with the people that are hanging out at McDonald's at
I know.
11 at night.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. No, that's true. I think you're right. Like it is a hustle. I think that's an important piece too, is that nothing worth having comes easy. I believe that's true. And I think that it's easy for me to say like, yeah, I'm balancing it well, and I'm not always. Like I
yeah.
for sure have tons of mental breakdowns where I'm like, I just don't feel, like I'm juggling all well, and I don't think you can be a master at multiple things. So I think that it's definitely something I have to work at all of the time at doing well, and just making sure I'm showing up in each area of my life and giving myself to that fully when I can, and also recognizing that I'm human and can't do
Mhm.
like all the things all the time. But you're right, like you're doing it. It's a hustle and it's exhausting, and there are tons of late nights and tons of times where I feel like I'm dropping balls and not doing things well, but I think it's worth it. I hope
Mhm.
so.
Oh yeah, it is. It really is. Like I mean, you're happy. Like at
Yeah.
the end of the day, and that message that you're sending to your daughter that like, hey, chase what makes you happy, not what
Yes.
makes you money, or not what makes you the most money.
Right.
I think that's an invaluable message to send.
Mm,
You know.
yeah. Thanks for saying that. I think that's so true, and I want that for other people in creative fields or industries that are parents, or like that have any commitment that feels tough. Like I just think that, especially like, not to get on a soapbox, but I do feel like there's somewhat of like unspoken thing towards moms in
Mhm.
the music industry, and sort of that like you become unusable when you become a mom, or like that you can't possibly do this as a parent. And I do think there, just are things that I believed, because society sort of sends that message that like
Mhm.
when you become a mom, like you said, you put everything else on the shelf. And in some ways that can be true. But you're right. Like I want my daughter to look back and not see that I gave up. I want her to see that I tried to do both things well. And I also had someone tell me, actually, here in Nashville, someone who was working in the industry. I was in a meeting trying to decide whether moving here was a good idea. And she said, do you want your daughter to feel like she was the reason you didn't chase your dreams? Because that might weigh really heavy on her. Like if she's an adult and she realizes, wow, my mom gave up her shot at a dream because of me, and now she doesn't
Mhm.
have it. And I was like, no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
So I think there's just a world where people can try their best to do
Hmm.
both things, you know?
Right. And I think like I don't know how old your daughter is, but it feels like right now you made the move to Nashville right at the right time because
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like she's old enough to kind of
Mm-mm.
have her own thing going back home in
Right.
Canada.
Yeah, no. I
So
mean, yeah, exactly.
like had you waited like 10 years and she was like 15, 16 years old and she
Yeah.
was like a kick-ass hockey player
Yeah.
or a lacrosse player, like whatever
Yes.
it is, it's
Yeah.
like then that might be a different conversation to have.
Yes.
But the fact that she's still so young, it's like, okay, you just put her in a different environment and she'll still find what she loves. So
Yes, exactly. She's 6. So, and when we moved here, she had just turned 5 and she
mhm,
hadn't started school yet. So her only school experience has been in Nashville. And so it's all she knows is
mhm,
here. So we weren't pulling her from like school that she loved, and we didn't live around family at the time. And so we weren't pulling her from like that security net. And so although I struggled with the decision, I think it was the right one. Like you said, I think the timing was right. And I think
mhm,
that's true for like most people that move to Nashville, especially as Canadians. Like all the doors have to open the right way
mhm.
for it to
Right,
work. And so
right.
when those doors started opening, I was like, okay, we're going because, it happened in a way that felt beyond me. Like I do feel like the doors were opened for me for a reason.
Oh, 100%. So you'd said that you're originally from the east coast of Canada, but then you moved to central Canada.
Yep. Yep. We hopped around a little bit.
So where about like Nova Scotia or
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm from just moved here from Halifax, Nova Scotia,
Mhm.
and then we lived in Thunder Bay, Ontario, which is like northwestern Ontario, I guess
Got
it
it.
would be
Yeah.
considered, although it borders Minnesota, so it's strange to think of it as northern, but yeah, so we're in the central Canada area for 5 years.
Oh, nice, nice,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, it's I'm still trying to make a bigger trip to Canada,
Yeah,
like,
you should.
but it's like I'm trying to figure out. Like I know have a lot of people in Toronto, but I feel like that's the very American move to do. It's like, oh yeah, all the Americans they just go to Toronto to say they've been in Canada.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I
no,
know.
I kind of want to either go to like Vancouver. Everybody
Yeah.
keeps telling me to go to PEI,
Oh, you
and
should.
it's
It's
like that
beautiful.
sounds cool. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like this is such a cliche, but it honestly happens to me all the time where if I'm talking to someone down here and I say I'm from Canada, they're like, do you know Joe from Toronto? And I'm like, no, I live 28 hours from Toronto. I don't know him.
Right.
Um, but you're right. I think that there's so many places you can visit, but PEI is gorgeous.
Mm,
It's so like different than a lot of places I've been in the States. So I feel like it would be cool for you. Toronto just feels like another city,
yeah.
you know?
Right. It feels like in a very Americanized city, and it's just
Yes.
like
Yeah.
because they've got like a basketball team, they got a baseball
Yes.
team, and it's like
Yeah.
let's just Toronto, come on over.
Yeah.
Let's make this happen.
I
So,
know. No, you're right. We just drove up there in November to see Taylor Swift. I got
mm,
tickets to the Eras tour, which is like the biggest feat of a life, I feel like now at this point. And so we drove up to see her play, and yeah, I felt like, oh my gosh, this doesn't even feel Canadian to me. It
mhm,
just feels like I am still in the States.
right, right, right. And I do have to admit, I feel really cool the fact that I can refer to it as PEI,
Yeah,
and
I
I feel
know.
like I'm like an insider or something. I
You
mean,
are. I just let that gloss over, but you're right. I know people are always like, um, yeah, they mess up the name or like call it something wrong,
right,
but you
right,
got
right.
it. Yeah,
So
you're honorary Canadian.
sweet. I'll take it. Oh, but so where are you kind of at creatively right now? I know you released some music last
Mhm.
year, but like,
Yeah,
what are you working on right now? What do you got going on?
yeah. So I'm working on a song to hopefully put out this spring that I'm really excited about, and wrote it with just some incredible songwriters here in Nashville, and so sort of in like a season of trying to figure out really like narrow down what I want my sound to be. I feel like I'm dancing a little bit of a genre line where I'm sort of in that like country pop vein, and then also like have a lot of sort of like folk or indie influence as well, I think, in my sound. And so So I definitely have like put out music that I think doesn't fully represent me before.
Mhm.
So I'm just trying to make sure I just want to be true to my sound with what I release. And so just figuring that out. But yeah, working on a few things right now, and still writing, all the time, and trying to write for other people, but also write for future projects, and just figure out like what the algorithm wants, like do we do an EP? Do we just do singles every 30 seconds? Like what are we what are we doing?
Okay. I feel like to answer that question, it depends on what your show situation is. If you're like
Yeah.
playing out all the time and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, we're going to be in Texas this weekend and then we're going to
Yeah.
like Delaware or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know who's going to Delaware to play music, but
Someone's got to go.
someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of the motto. Then like having like a physical like CD, whether it's EP,
For
LP, like
sure.
that's very beneficial. But
Yeah.
if you're playing like a couple times a month, just kind of
Yeah.
stay singles. Like that's just kind of where it needs to be. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what I've done, and I think probably where I'll stay because I'm really just playing like writers rounds as they come
hmm
available for me right now, which is a cool way to meet other writers and like meet people in the industry. But they're definitely not. I'm not touring
hmm
right now, and so I don't feel the need to be putting out like huge projects. And really just trying more than anything to network here and get
hmm
connected. And you've probably, I'm sure you've heard this like so many times, but Nashville is such a who town, and so like you can have all the talent in the world, and if you don't have the right connections, like it can just sort of not work for you. And so I'm trying to like work on music and put that out, and grow my fan base or like listener base, but also try and connect in the industry. And so
100%. It's an industry of even though you don't have to know everybody,
yeah.
you just have to know one person and they
Yeah.
can introduce you to everybody. So,
Yeah. And sometimes it's just knowing the right person. um
100%.
yeah, I think I'm such a people person, and like I love meeting people and connecting, and so I think that's like a huge part of someone who's in this industry and in this town specifically, is like that's so much of it that I like tell Tyler, my husband, if I'm going out to a round, it's like a work night. Like I'm going to work. I'm going to, meet people and set up meetings, and like it's just such a huge part of it that I didn't realize until I started coming to Nashville. But now it's like just as much as writing, you have to be out there networking.
Oh yeah, 100%. So this current stuff that you're working on, the
Yeah.
current music, will this be your first like fully Nashville written, recorded, produced stuff, or was the stuff you released last year technically Nashville?
Yeah, so the song I released last year, it's called Like You Did. I wrote that here in Nashville after my move, and worked on it with a producer here in Nashville. So that was like my truly proper Nashville
Yeah.
release.
Okay.
My other two songs that I released before that were both written with Nashville writers,
hmm
for the most part, but it was all virtual. And so
hmm
part of my story is that when the pandemic happened, like the world shut down, as you know, and as we all know, and Nashville, like for a brief window of time, opened up like to the world, I feel like, because
hmm
everyone went on Zoom, like all the rights were on Zoom and all the
hmm
meetings were happening on Zoom. And so I just took advantage of that opportunity. And like my daughter was super young and she was napping all the time. And so I would just write multiple times a day, every day of the week. And I just got to meet a lot of Nashville people through that. And so I was still in Canada when I put out those first two songs, but I was so connected with people in Nashville at that time that I was writing with all Nashville writers and working with
Nice.
people from here. So, but
Nice.
like you did, my last single was my first proper Nashville release.
Fair, fair, fair. It's funny. You brought up the pandemic, and it's like all the negative things that came out of that. There
Yeah.
was still so many positives because it's
Yeah.
like everybody figured out like what it is they actually love doing.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are focusing on that now, whether it's music, whether it's auto maintenance, like whatever
Yeah.
it is, that like
Yeah.
everybody just had time to like really focus in on what they love to do. And like even for me, I feel very comfortable in saying had it not been for the pandemic, I'd probably not know 90% of the people I know right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Same. Yeah, I mean, thanks for saying that because I always struggle with like how to talk about that because
Hmm.
the pandemic was such a hard time for so many people.
Hmm.
And I don't want to minimize that or like make it sound like it was easy for me by any
Yeah.
means because it wasn't. Obviously, it was the worst. But I do not think I would be here if it wasn't for the pandemic, which feels weird to say. But I just connected with people. And like you said, it just gave you space and time to really dive into what you loved and like try making sourdough bread or like
Hmm.
just all the things we did during COVID, which was so funny to look back on. But for me, this really was the best investment of my time quarantined at home, and it led
Right.
to being here in Nashville. So I'm grateful
Right.
for it.
Right, right. And it's like I've had the conversation with myself several different times since the pandemic. It's like because everybody's like, "Oh, come to Nashville,
Yeah,
move to Nashville," and it's like, yeah, I can move to Nashville, and I'd be the 100th podcaster
yeah,
there,
yeah,
and I'd have all the musicians coming through, and it'd be
hmm,
great. Or I could stay here in Central Texas and be
yeah,
one of 7 podcasters
yeah, for
when
sure.
people from Nashville are already starting to move this way. Like
Yeah,
I'm seeing a lot of Nashville artists
yeah,
starting to come this way, and it's like
yeah,
I'm not moving. Like everybody I want to come this way are already starting to come this way, so it's like
yeah,
I'm going to stay put. You know?
yeah.
So.
No, that's so true. I mean, I do think that that's another thing the pandemic did. It made it so that this isn't weird. Like being
Hmm.
on Zoom is not strange. And I do think that, especially in your world, like most podcasts are being filmed and recorded this way, even with people in Nashville. Like that,
Hmm.
if two people are in Nashville, a lot of times they're still recording on Zoom or, doing this like, um, sort of like in this space. So I think
Hmm.
that COVID opened up a space for you to be able to stay there and still be just as connected as you would be here. And I think that's true for music too. Like, I don't think that I felt it would be impossible for me to do music from Canada. I really wanted to be here. And so for my
Yeah.
personal story, I really felt like I should be here, but there are so many incredibly talented musicians that aren't here that maybe travel here or like right on Zoom and it's working. It's still
Hmm.
working. And you can really do it from anywhere, especially because it's all social media now. You have to like
One.
utilize that and you can do that from anywhere with a Wi Fi
Right.
signal. So,
100%. So.
yeah.
So you'd mentioned as far as like shows and stuff, you're pretty much just doing writers rounds, or do you have any big shows coming up?
Yeah, no big shows coming up. I'm just sort of like yeah, doing writers rounds right now. I'd love to do a full band show eventually.
Mhm.
Um so I need to work on yeah, I need just being transparent like I need to work on more up-tempo stuff if I'm going to play a live band show because I get into a room and I'm like a fairly happy person and have a great life and I'm like what is the saddest thing we could write today? Like, or I'll hear an idea and I'm like that's amazing. How can we make that way sadder? And so I realized when I'm out playing rounds, like that's the perfect vibe for a songwriter's round because
Mhm.
it's acoustic and low key and people are there to hear you and they want to, hear your stories. And a lot of those are, ballads. And so, but that's a personal goal for 2025 is to diversify my catalog, write some more up tempo stuff that I can maybe play in a full band show. And so, I mean, some of my friends have played incredible full band shows here, and I
Mhm.
just feel so inspired by it that that's a huge goal for me, but just not where I'm at right now.
100%. How do you kind of I don't want to say make that correction because that sounds
Yeah,
mean, but like
no.
how do you kind of make a move towards diversifying and making more up tempo numbers? Are you like trying different life experiences that
Mhm.
might help you have write more up tempo stuff, or is it just physically a mental switch that you have to make?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't mastered it yet, clearly, so I'm
Okay.
still learning and I'm open to advice. So if you have any, I have all ears. But I think a few things for me are surrounding myself with the right people. And so I've found like a crew of people, and I'm still writing with new people for sure. But I found a crew of people that it just works every time we get into a room. There's just so much chemistry, and I really trust those people. And so I know that I can go into that room and say like, "Hey, I need something up tempo,
Yeah.
and can you help me get there?" Because in myself, I just feel incapable. And then I also have to just work on my mindset. I do feel sometimes that like you can lose depth in a song when you're working
Mm.
at like an up tempo situation. And so I have this like mindset that I need to work on where it's like this needs to be heavier. Like they need to know I'm a good writer. So I have to make this really sad. But I've heard some up-tempo stuff lately that I'm like, that's great. I don't feel like that you were losing any, authenticity
Mhm.
or talent in that song. And so I think finding the right people. I also love writing with a producer in the room, because if I have a producer who's like working on a vibe as we're writing, I feel that that inspires me a little bit more. So if I hear like an up tempo vibe getting started from the producer, then I feel like, okay, this is working. Like I do like this. That helps me get more in that mindset, opposed to just me sitting on my floor with my guitar. It just always ends up super slow and sad.
Right. Fair. That's, hey, I mean, you just kind of fall back on like, I mean, it feels really weird to say slow and sad feels comfortable, but like, I
Yeah,
mean,
it just does.
yeah,
I'm nothing but consistent.
right, right. So, so obviously you're working on new music, and hopefully
Yeah,
we'll have some stuff out here by the summer. You know, like
yeah,
obviously just kind of when it
yeah,
happens. But
yeah.
kind of looking forward, what's the hope for the rest of the year? Is it just kind of consistently focusing on new music, or are you hoping to kind of get that full band show, or like for a perfect 2025, what would that look like for you?
Yeah. So I would say like putting out music for sure is on the top of that list, and getting some more diverse stuff out there that can
Mm-hmm.
showcase sort of me as an artist as a whole, opposed
Mm-hmm.
to like all consistently sort of more ballads. And I think that will help. Like I got some playlisting, and like even like a local radio station who played my song that came out last year, but I got a lot of feedback from other radio stations and other playlisters who were like, we love the song, it's just too slow. I was like, yeah, but it's so good, right? Like, so I think like just being able to offer that so that I can get my music out to more listeners, and
Mm-hmm.
that's also a huge goal of mine, is just to expand my listener base and try and do the content thing on social media. I get into good like waves with that where I'm doing a good job, and then it's like, exhausting. You do it all the
Yep.
time, and
Oh yeah.
more than me, I'm sure, like with all that you have to do for editing. And so, so definitely like expanding my reach in that way is huge for me. And then, yeah, I would love to work towards a full band showcase. And that's definitely something that I would love to work on. Just need to make sure again that I have the songs to play for that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. It's I've had a whole system in place for the last 6 months, and then like the last 2 weeks, I've kind of started slacking off a little bit on the social media, and it's just like, because we did like a live podcast thing two
I
weeks
saw
ago,
that. Yeah.
and I was like, okay, we're gonna hit this. This is gonna be the finish line, and then I'm gonna take like a week off, and then that week off expanded to 2 weeks, and now it's just
Yes.
kind of like, uh-oh, downhill slide. Let
Yeah.
pump the brakes on this one. So yeah.
It's so easy to do that. And I think that some of the people that I know that do it the best, like do it like a job. Like they
Hmm.
schedule it out like part of their work week, and there's consistency and commitment. Um, it's just hard. And I'm sure you understand this. Like when it's yourself, you're all tied up in it. And so I spend all of this time on like a day in the life. For example, I'll like film it and edit it. And I'm like, this is the best ever. And then it gets like 200 views on TikTok. And I'm like,
Hmm.
well, that sucked. Like that didn't feel worth it. But I
Hmm.
know that consistency is key. And so I think that I really just want to get into a good rhythm. And then also recognizing that like you and I are just humans. And like
Hmm.
if we get into a slump for a couple of weeks, and that's fine, and we can bounce back, and to not be discouraged. And I think, algorithms are changing all the time. And so it can feel overwhelming, but I need to put myself out there and just do
Hmm.
it. So
100%. I was editing on Friday. I was editing together that live podcast, and
yeah,
I was sitting there. I was like, all right, 10 hour. Like I literally started editing on it at six p.m. and I think it was like 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, and I was still sitting there just hacking away at it, and like at that point, I'm like, man, this just isn't working. This
yeah,
doesn't work, and I finally got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm obviously overthinking this entire process, and just kind of like I'm going to live with it, and whatever it is, it is. And then I
Yes.
send it to a couple people that are like, dude, this sounds amazing. Like,
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't hear this? This doesn't sound
Yeah.
terrible to you? Like, to me,
Yeah.
this sounds absolutely terrible. And they're
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
mm,
That's so
okay.
real. It's so personal. Like and you are so tied to it that of course you hear every little thing that
Hmm.
other people will never hear. And like, would you call yourself a perfectionist?
It depends on the situation. Like,
Yeah.
when it's my personal projects,
Yeah.
I put way too much effort into it,
Yeah.
which that sounds weird, but like when
No.
it's not my project, I know exactly when to cut it off because it's like, okay, I've done everything I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
There's just nothing else I can do with it. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's so real. Like there is a difference between being involved in something that's not personal and you sort of have more, you're able to see it differently. And
Hmm.
so when you're tied to something like you are to your work and like I am to my music, I think I'm the same as you. I'll zero in on this little vocal thing I did and I'm like, well, that ruins the whole song and no one catches it, you know?
Hmm.
And so I think there's like an art in stepping away, like you said, just being like, I'm actually not helping this anymore. And I need to step away and give this some space. And so I do that with songs all the time, especially if I'm like, I'm hitting a wall or something. I think stepping away and giving some space to your art and then coming back a few days later when you've had like a clearer mind is really
Hmm.
healthy. And I think that we need to do that sometimes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
My problem with that is I'll step away, but then I step away too long,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I come back
Same.
like a month later, and it's like, oh crap. Okay, where did I go with the?
Yeah.
So.
Same. I mean, and I'm sure you've heard this from other writers, but like my catalog of unfinished songs is embarrassing. Like it's extensive. And I think that um I'm like you, I'll step away for too long and then I lose the connection to it and then it goes to die. Um and so I've actually gone back this year, like trying to organize my catalog and stuff and found songs that I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel re-inspired by this. And so I think that stepping away for a little bit is healthy.
Right.
Stepping away too long could be destructive to the creative process. But yeah, I do think that especially when you're a creative person and or you're really tied to your art, it's hard to be not biased and it's hard to be objective. And so I
Mm.
think having other people around you who can speak into that is really helpful. And I mean, you're doing a great job. You're doing great.
I'm trying. I am trying so freaking hard. So,
Yeah, it's hard.
um, yeah, actually, that might actually be a really cool experiment or like a
Yeah.
writing exercise for you is going back like once a week or whatever, just picking out
Yeah.
one of them songs. Like, I may not finish it, but we're gonna
Yeah.
at least see if we can make some progress on it. And
Yeah.
like, I don't know, how often do you find yourself writing right now? Is that like something you do every day, or is it like kind of when you're more inspired?
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to like I'm in writing rooms multiple times a week with other
Hmm.
co-writers and so that's definitely a regular part of my week, but I'm trying to push myself to do something each day. It's kind of like honestly like working out for me. It's like I know I need to do it every day to like make that a part of my life that's like, you know, that I'm in shape in that way at the gym. And so it's the same with writing. Like I want to make sure I'm exercising that muscle every day so that I'm, at the best of my abilities when I show up to write. So it's little things like I did this, speaking of finding things that you did a long time ago, I did this TikTok idea with my husband where I sat down and I was like on camera, give me a word and I'll write a
Hmm.
song about it.
Nice.
And he gave me the word U-Haul. And so on camera, I wrote a verse and a chorus to the word U-Haul and I posted it and whatever, left it alone. But I went back to it a few weeks ago and I was like, I like this song. I really like this song. So I think I'm going to finish it. And even that like exercise was just strictly for, it was just content. It wasn't like me trying to exercise my creative brain, but it was so fun to sit down and like force myself to write a song about a prompt that I wouldn't necessarily choose for myself. So
Hmm.
little things like that or journaling or like I was reading a book the other day and I saw a line that I thought was so cool and I just put that into my notes and kind of just sat with it for a little while and just played around with some ideas. So even that, like just exercising it so that I'm staying, fresh and making sure I'm just using that part of my brain as much as I can is really helpful.
100%. I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
And so I've been meaning to ask, is that your guitar sitting behind you or?
This is a funny story. This is my best friend's guitar, actually.
Okay.
It's a very expensive guitar that she got. She had cancer as a child, and so the Make-A-Wish Foundation got her a guitar, and I'm pretty sure it's that one. And she is also Canadian, and she was in Nashville before me, and she moved back to Canada for just a few months, and she left her guitars with me. So I'm looking at her white Gretsch in front of me, and then this is a Taylor. So these are both hers, but they're just hanging out. She's back in Nashville, and I don't know why I still have them. But I have a little Martin. That's my little baby. I was a Taylor girl for a while, but I moved on. I really like the warmth of my Martin.
Nice. Because I was sitting here looking at it. It doesn't even look like that guitar has strings on it. Like just the way it looks on the camera, it doesn't even look like it has strings. And
That's funny.
I'm like, why does she have a stringless guitar just kind of hanging behind
for
her?
vibes, just for the vibes.
Right.
No, that's really funny. It's funny you asked that. I'll have to let her know. She needs to come get that.
Right. It happens. So,
Yeah.
but I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with me. It's been an absolute blast. If anybody wants to check out your music, all that fun stuff, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah. So I'm everywhere on all the streaming platforms under Hannah Sears. You can find me on Instagram and all the TikTok and all the social media places under the same name, Hannah Sears. And thank you for having me. This was so fun. This just felt like a fun chat. This was so easy, low key. Love it.
That's the way I like to keep it. So
yeah, well, appreciate it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will catch you all later.